Two possible trade partners for the Cubs are two of their biggest rivals. I don't know if they're both their number two rival or one's two and the other one's a slight third, but they're definitely at the top of the list, right behind the Cardinals. And that'd be the Sox and the Brewers. We're going to talk about the possibility of the Cubs pulling off a trade with one of those two teams and also the latest on Cody Bellinger. Could the market for Cody Bellinger be getting even thinner? That's what we're going to get into here. Welcome to the Cubs Baseball channel. Like and subscribe. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Let's get this thing started. Tis the season, friends. What do you say? I'm Mick Gillispie. Thank you for being here as we talk Cubs baseball through the holidays. And I want you guys to find me at Broadcaster Mick on the socials. Again, appreciate all of you guys for being here and hanging out. All right, let's talk Cubs baseball. Let's get into it because I think there's some stuff that's interesting today. And some of you guys are like, well, I'm not learning anything new, Mick. Well, look, it's not like there's a lot to learn new every day. I mean, this is a very slow market for the Cubs, but that doesn't mean that it's a market that we can't look at and start to figure out what direction that things are going to happen, right? All right, so let me get started right now with this. Could the Cubs make a trade with the Milwaukee Brewers or the Chicago White Sox? This is a tough thing to do, however you look at it, okay? First off, let's just start with the Brewers. Corbin Burnes would be an excellent addition to the Cubs. Cy Young, this guy he's definitely the top of the rotation type guy. Last year, helped lead Milwaukee to the postseason. But I got a feeling that there may be some hard feelings there, right? I mean, the Cubs got Craig Counsell. Not that the Brewers were going to have him. I mean, he was going to go somewhere else. But if it was the Mets, if it wasn't your number one rival for Milwaukee, and maybe the Cubs' number two or number three rival, it would be different. I really felt like that the Brewers and their people felt hurt by Craig Counsell going to the Cubs. And with that, you're also talking about an organization that traded Josh Hader in the midst of a pennant race a few years ago. And they hated that. And I would too. I can't imagine being in that clubhouse and you trade away arguably the most dynamic closer in baseball. I mean, you talk about just absolutely sick spin and velocity and a tough guy to hit. Yeah, that's Hader. And you traded him away. And it felt like it was all about money. Okay. Now, do you want to make a deal with the Cubs before Pat Murphy, your new manager that replaced Craig Counsell, even has a chance to show up and manage a game? This feels like, to me, the Brewers go into the season, they're not successful, and then you make a trade at the deadline. Although, what if they contend? Because this guy's probably not going to re-sign, talking about Corbin Burnes, with Milwaukee. I mean, they'll get outbid by someone else, right? So it is a little bit of a risk. But if you make the playoffs, anything can happen, right? And that's what a team owner and a team and an organization should be striving for every year, to get into the playoffs. And then, you make something happen like Arizona did last year, and then look at what they're doing right now. Normally they're sellers, but now they're buyers. And even though the Dodgers have gone out and bought all these players, I got to tell you something. Arizona has a better roster. Yeah, I'm telling you that. Now, is that going to translate? maybe not. But I mean, honestly, if the Diamondbacks are able to play like they did down the stretch last year, and the guys that they just added, they should be better. And the Dodgers, they obviously with Glass now and Yamamoto and Ohtani, they're going to be good too. They were good last year, and it was a battle between those two teams. So anyway, my point is, I just think it's going to be tough for Milwaukee to make this trade. And honestly, the Cubs would probably be in a spot where they'd have to overpay to get him, just because the organization would want to save face. Can you imagine if you traded your star pitcher to the Cubs to join your old star manager, and then they started winning and you stunk? I think it would be a turnoff to your fan base. So I just don't think that's going to happen. I'm taking that one off the table. Now, the other one is a trade with the White Sox. And years went by, and you didn't see this a lot because we love baseball, and we love to break down the White Sox Cubs trades. That's what you do when you have two teams in the same city, right? Hey, how did Sammy Sosa go from the White Sox to the Cubs? He's like the all-time Cubs home run leader, right? Yeah, it was a trade. What about the trade that Dylan Cease, who's the pitcher that the Cubs are definitely interested in, 2 years left, was a runner-up for the Cy Young a couple of seasons ago. Last year played on a really bad team and didn't have the results, but that a lot of that has to do with the team you're on. Is Dylan Cease a number one bona fide ace? I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't necessarily think he couldn't be. I think it's like this. I've always been impressed with him, and he got there in a trade, and that's a trade that I've broken down with people inside the organization, with other organizations, people that love baseball, people that know baseball, scouts. I mean, I've talked about that trade, that Quintana for Cease and Jimenez trade over and over again. I didn't like it when it happened. And it wasn't that I didn't think that the Cubs needed a starting pitcher. I just was never a big Quintana guy. And I saw him come up through the White Sox system, very consistent, but just a consistent back end guy, 4 or 5. Yeah, I just never felt like he was an ace. And Dylan Cease, how did the White Sox pick the only guy that would have been a Cubs star pitcher that they would have developed under Theo to get him to make that deal? I mean, how did they just know, right? And then Eloy Jimenez, I'm really kind of surprised that he hasn't had a bigger career, because he's got a lot of talent. Now, he's had some injuries, but we break these trades down. And honestly, there's people who will tell me that the Cubs won that trade. Yeah, that really feel like Quintana held his own. And I think he did. He's exactly what they thought they were getting, right? Then you have the trade that the Kimbrel trade, and then and I've always liked Nick Madrigal. I know some of you guys kind of differ on my opinions, but with him, but I like him. I don't like him as a starter. I like him though as a utility guy. I just think that he would have had such a different career had he not had that season-ending injury with the White Sox, before he was traded to the Cubs. But he was just watching him play the game coming up. He's a super contact guy, puts the ball in play, great 2-strike approach, makes the plays defensively, not a huge amount of range, but makes the plays on the balls he gets to. And if I want to, for me, a utility guy, I want a guy that plays, that I can count on defensively. And then Madrigal also has come up with some big hits as well. But even the fact that you got a guy that can put the ball in play is important to me, right? So that's another trade. So if you make a trade, and we could probably sit here and go back and forth on this all day. If you make a trade with the White Sox, they're going to try to get, like they would with any deal they're making right now, Chris Getz. They're, the guy in charge now for them, someone that I have respect for, saw him come up as a player, scrappy guy. I think he's going to do a good job. This is the first real piece he has to move to start rebuilding the organization. And he could fleece the Cubs in a deal. I mean, really, because the Cubs have so much talent. You know, you could go and make a deal where you pull 4 or 5 big leaguers off that minor league roster and get those guys, and all of a sudden your organization's different the very next day. And it may be worth it to the Cubs, because if Dylan Cease comes in and is a real ace and looks like he did 2 years ago and helps them, adds to their rotation through a bunch of innings. I mean, he's been healthy. So it could work for both teams here. And, you know, it's possible. I think that's a much better match than the Brewers, who, if you lose the trade to the Cubs, I mean, just think about that. And you got a new guy running the show in Milwaukee after Stearns went to the Mets, and, you know, your owner and his comments after Counsell left. And I just can't imagine a scenario where the Brewers would trade Burns to the Cubs right now. And maybe at the deadline, but not right now. So those are the 2 trades that are possible. We'll talk about Bieber in Cleveland, but I feel like if you were saying, okay, who are the 2 best guys? And a lot of you guys felt the same way as me. I worry about Tyler Glasnow's injury history. You know, and I hear people say, oh, he's right there. It's good. Look, this guy's been filthy since the day he showed up. You can't question that. But he also is throwing like 120 innings. You know, that's like 5 inning starts. And to me, you're burning up the bullpen when you do that. And I know a lot of teams are kind of there right now. But to me, the best teams are going to be the teams that their starters give them, you know, 6 or 7 innings, and then your bullpen's fresh when you need them, when a guy does go 5. So, you know, to me, I look at those guys that can't go past 5 innings or hurt all the time, and they become a liability. So that's where we are with that. Anyway, let me switch gears here. Read your comments all the time. And I got to say this first. Toronto fans, I'm surprised that you guys have popped up in the comments section. You've gotten on to me for taking some shots at what I call the Siberia of baseball. When I say that, I'm not saying that Toronto is a bad place. I know it's a great city. I've heard very clean. You got poontang over there, you know, your fries with the gravy on them. I get that, right? Every Canadian I've ever met's nice. Like, you guys are really good people too. Very likable. So, and the movie Strange Brew was always, you know, when I was younger, it was one of my favorite movies as a real small kid. We used to watch it at daycare. I mean, it's old, but yeah. I'm not saying that Toronto's a bad city. I'm just saying for baseball, Canada loves hockey, and it's number 1. Basketball is number 2, right? The Raptors, and then baseball is number 3. So it's just not the same as playing at Wrigley. So what I want you guys to do, and I got to tell you this too, I was impressed with the Blue Jays' average attendance. It's right there with the Cubs, which was kind of surprising to me. But you know what? Come to a game at Wrigley and see kind of how we do it, and then you'll kind of understand what I meant by that. It's just, when the Cubs are winning, Chicago's a Cubs town. I'll just put it like that. When the Cubs are winning, Cubs baseball is king. But no disrespect meant to Toronto. And I honestly thought it was really funny to read your guys' comments. All right. Update on Cody Bellinger, who could possibly be going to the Blue Jays. Reports are starting to surface now that the Blue Jays are interested in Michael A. Taylor. And guess what he plays? Center field. He'd be a much cheaper player to sign. I'm sure that everyone is, in these front offices, are tired of dealing with Scott Boras already. From the reports, you know, he put a number out, and he's not going down off of that number. and you're seeing teams fall out. We talked about Bellinger. I want Bellinger to come back as a Cub. I think that the majority of Cubs fans want him to come back, but it also has to be a deal that's realistic. If the Blue Jays fell out of this, say they go and they get Taylor, then what? Then you're really starting to try to find a partner here. And I think that that's going to be the way that the Cubs end up getting Bellinger, right? Teams are worried about exit velocity, which I told you I don't care about. I'm just not hung up on analytics. I'm just not. I mean, the guys, to me, that doesn't matter. But to some people it does, and to organizations it does. And you're talking about teams that right now are ate up with analytics. You got to have a stat for everything. And that's one that hurts him. I'm more concerned about the 2 years before he got to the Cubs. I've always had this worry that these guys that are in a contract year, they go out, they have these giant seasons, and then all of a sudden they get the money and then they're kind of going back the other way. That would be mine when you're wanting, 7 years or something out of this guy. And I mean, 7 years to me is too much, but I mean, that may be where it ends up, right? They're probably saying 7 years, $200 million or something like that. I'd even be happier if it was my negotiations where I said, hey, I'll give you less years and more money just so that you don't have that guy camping out, if he's not playing up to the standard that you thought you were buying, a.k.a. Jason Hayward, right? So, and then the other thing for the Cubs is that, and we've talked about this, Mike Tauchman, Pete Crow Armstrong, Alexander Canario, you got center fielders. They're not Cody Bellinger, but you got center fielders. So if he went somewhere else and then maybe you swung a trade for Pete Alonso, I think that would work out as well, right? So, but we'll find out. I mean, just the Michael A. Taylor stuff. If you took Toronto out of the mix, then what? Then it's like you're really trying to find somewhere to put this guy besides just coming back to where we all want him, and that's in Chicago, and that may be Seattle, right? But that's how negotiations go. And, and don't look past the fact that Bellinger was the best player on the team last year because he was the best player on the team. Cubs aren't even close to the playoffs. They're not sniffing it without Bellinger. And he looked like an MVP last year, missed 30 games because of an injury. Cubs stunk when he wasn't there. And when he came back immediately, there was a difference. And we all see that. The last thing I want to say is some of you guys send me comments, and they're great. And most of them are really, really good comments. And then sometimes, every once in a while, somebody will, swing in there with something, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me, right? So I got one the other day, like, Mick, you're a minor league baseball broadcaster, and you're just saying that these prospects are good because your heart's in it. Okay. Let me tell you about me, because maybe I haven't done that. I played baseball, and then I was like a player manager in the summer leagues, and then I umpired baseball. And the last year I played was the year before I started broadcasting baseball. And then I got into broadcasting, and then I've been doing that ever since. I don't remember a time when I didn't have baseball in my life. I love the game. Absolutely love it. To me, it's the best game that's ever been invented. My dad used to talk about 90% of it being upstairs. I don't know if I believe that anymore, because I think that you do have to have a certain amount of athleticism, but a lot of it is between your ears, and that's what makes it great. I've always looked at the way that players play as a player because I wanted to be one, and I wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough to play on the college baseball team at Maryland, which is what I really wanted to do. There was no way I was going to play at Alabama. They stunk. I stunk. They were great. Got that backwards. Yeah, they're going to College World Series when I'm there, and Maryland was bad, and I still couldn't make it. Right. But I was just around it all the time. And I got to learn the game from Hall of Fame Alabama manager Jim Wells. Used to sit in the dugout with him. Got to know a guy named Jim Crawford, Crawdaddy, who was a scout for the Cubs forever, by the way. And then that, coincidentally, I ended up working with the Cubs organization, the Smokies. And then you guys may recognize me from spring training games and Cubs convention panels and different stuff. I've done a bunch of different stuff with the minor leagues and with the big leagues. I love the Cubs. I was a fan of the Cubs. And I say that. But the one thing I've never done is been one of these guys who will tell you that someone's good when they're not. And honestly, it would probably have helped my career out to do that. But I've always been honest. And the reason why is because I care about my credibility. And the other reason, too, is that that's my power, is I can go watch a game and evaluate how good someone is or how they're not good or where their weaknesses are. I mean, all of the guys that we see are good, but what makes that person different? There's a clip at the beginning of my channel, and it's got a scout on there named Gary Hughes. He was the Cubs special assistant to Jim Hendry. And Gary Hughes he's one of the top 10 scouts, according to Baseball America, of the last century. But he's the best guy, according to me, I've ever met. The man was amazing. Great person. I loved him. I don't think a lot of people, you couldn't not love him. He's like this, parrot head, Big Lebowski, baseball scout savant that helped organizations build World Series champions. And we lost him in 2020 during COVID. But anyway, he's sitting in my booth one day and I'm watching a terrible baseball team. And I tell him, and the only reason he was there is because the air condition was out and it was like 110 degrees in Chattanooga. And he said he could sit in. Would I mind if he sat in? I said, as long as you do the game with me. And in between innings, I started talking about a couple guys on this bad team. One of them was a center fielder that was hitting below the Mendoza line. And I said, this guy is one of the best players on the team, right? Not listed as a prospect. Nobody had him as a prospect in AA. I said, but when he's not in center field, the pitchers hate life. He's got the best first step I've ever seen. And I think he's one of the smartest players I've ever watched. And then I told him there was another pitcher who was the fifth guy in the rotation, and he was terrible. I mean, they had an earned run average of 7. He had given up 10 runs in two of his last 3 starts. And I told Gary, I said, this guy, we have the worst middle infield I've ever seen. Nobody can get to any of the balls. I said, all of his runs come with 2 outs and a lot of them with 2 strikes. And I said, they don't even, the official scores here give you hits when you didn't deserve them when you're on the road. So it looks a lot worse than it is. Well, pitching coach Dennis Llewellyn taught this guy how to throw a cutter, and he got to the big leagues, and so did the other guy. The center fielder was Sam Fold, and that pitcher was Kevin Hart. And I'm not one of these guys that's like, hey, I'm in love with the player because they're on my team or I'm watching them every day. I'm kind of the opposite. If you know anything about that scout mentality, normally it's that not we, but them, and I'm kind of the same way. You concentrate too much on the things that a guy can't do, and you wonder if they can improve that or how that's going to manifest itself or translate in this, or they're going to be able to adjust at the next level, right? And the reason I'm saying all this, and I could probably do an entire show on this stuff, is that when I tell you that the Cubs have a really good system right now, I'm being honest. They do. I didn't like that trade for Nelson Velasquez. I didn't like the DJ Hurst trade. There's a lot of other guys I didn't care when they traded. As a matter of fact, some first-round picks that when they got traded, I'm like, hey, You just fleeced somebody. I honestly don't really even get to know a lot of these guys on a personal level. I watch them every day, and some of the guys I do. But I love the way that certain guys play the game, like Pete Crow Armstrong. If you're in a booth and you're watching a guy play the game, you want to see somebody that plays it with passion. My favorite Cub, my favorite guy I ever covered was Ryan Friel. Yeah, Ryan Friel, who's the anniversary of his death, former Cub, was just a few days ago. And he was badass because he played the game like his pants were on fire. He played every single inning of every single game I ever saw him. Like he was out to prove that if you didn't see him, but you had heard about how this guy plays, that you were there to see him do it again. And I think that when you don't have the natural talent, the God-given talent, you can still give it 110%. And I think that, and I watch guys, there was a time, and I've been critical of the organization when Theo Epstein was there because I felt like they became entitled and I felt like they were elitist and they didn't play the game hard. And that, to me, is one of the worst things that you can do as a player because you're getting paid to play baseball when the rest of us are out here working a real job. Not to say that baseball's not a real job, but it's not. You're playing a game, and God bless you for doing it. But I think just as someone that loves this game, and like I do for so many years, I just want to see guys go out there and play like Bellinger did last year, like they give a shit, like they care. Like it means something to them. Like they know that all of us that are spending our dollar to be there and watch them are getting their best. Right? So anyway, going back to my whole point on this. If I tell you I think someone's good, I believe that. If I say that they're not, I believe that too. I'm not a cheerleader for the Cubs players in the minor league system. I do want to see those guys do well, but I'm not over here like a lot of my colleagues, and they do that, where you hear them talk about a guy, and then you get off the wherever they're talking about them, and you say, "Hey, man, you really think that?" "No, man, I'm just, I just like that guy." I'm not that person, and it's probably hurt my career. But because I'm in a business where you'll just go and get a guy who's in finance and then make them a baseball expert. And then instead of them being able to go out and watch and know this because they're professionals, somebody's feeding them the information. You're on this channel because I'm the guy that can watch and tell you. I can give you 20 years of being around the organization experience and then another 20 of playing. And maybe longer than that. So when I got that message the other day, it did stick in my craw a little bit. But I love all of you guys, even that message, the person that sent that, all of you guys for being part of what we're doing here. This really is a special baseball community. We're going to just keep on working our ass off to bring in more great content and cover the Cubs. And I got a lot of things planned for this channel in the future. We're just laying the groundwork right now. Got I do have my Smokies Christmas t-shirt on that they gave away in July, Christmas in July. And I hope that all of you guys are having a Merry Christmas. Thanks for hanging out here on the Cubs Baseball channel. Let's do it again tomorrow. Also, talking about the Smokies. Right now is a great time to go to smokiesbaseball.com and check out the deals. The Cubs AA affiliate with some great stuff over there. And that includes, autograph baseball cards at the Collector's Corner, which is their team store, game-worn jerseys, bats and balls, and all that stuff. Find out for yourself, though, at the Smokies team store. Go Cubs!